This video is brought to you by Squarespace, an all-in-one platform for building your brand and growing your business online. I don't know if you guys have heard the news, but there's a new law that says you can't be ugly on screen anymore. If your forehead moves, it's punishable by death. I'm kidding, but you would think that's the case given how actors on screen look nowadays. I was actually just talking to a friend the other day about a TV show, a 60s period piece, and she told me she couldn't get past the first episode because an actor with iPhone face showed up. And I get it. I mean, people have been complaining about iPhone face for years now. The first time it came onto my radar, I think, was when Dakota Johnson did that awful modernish Persuasion adaptation. But if you're not aware, iPhone face refers to the intrusion of modern beauty standards in historical period dramas. I will say that iPhone face is sometimes in the eye of the beholder. I've definitely seen compilations of people with supposed iPhone face that I've disagreed with personally, such as Timothée Chalamet and Margot Robbie. I think sometimes an actor is just styled in a modern way, and that can be confusing. And, you know, there's also this idea that no one is truly, really period accurate in Hollywood because audiences, no matter what they say, do prefer to see healthy looking leads who have showered recently without skin blemishes on their screens. Even if in historical reality, every other character would be showing signs of malnutrition or at the very least syphilis. So there's that. It's subjective. My normal disclaimer is, of course, that people are free to do what they want with their faces and bodies. But in my opinion, it is getting in the way of the craft of acting and filmmaking. And that's what this video is about. Real people look imperfect in real life. So when you have a coal miner's daughter who looks like she had a facelift, I'm left there wondering, where on earth did she get this money from? And is this mine based in LA? Unrelated, I actually found out recently that there are hidden oil rigs all around LA, including inside the Beverly Center, which is this like eerie liminal mall space that is very close to Beverly Hills. The more you know. Also, acting is vulnerable and it's supposed to be reflective of the human experience, which is often ugly. As an audience, we know this, we love this, we award this.
Thank you for recognizing me in this role.
And there's a reason why every award show highlight reel is just a compilation of actors screaming and crying. These are the performances that we believe are the highest form of this art. But I think the situation we've gotten ourselves into is two-pronged. Actors are increasingly disincentivized to look ugly and to perform ugliness. By the way, when I talk about ugliness, I'm using the term pretty hyperbolically. What I really mean is just imperfect. Archer Green similarly leans on this terminology in his video, Why Aren't Actors Ugly Anymore? In it, he argues that Hollywood used to allow actors to look just, more unconventional. You could be a normal guy on the street, and if you had talent, you could get booked. If anything, an actor's look could add something to the character. Think of all the films from the 60s and 70s, like Once Upon a Time in the West and The Godfather, which featured lots of aesthetic variation, but those actors' unique looks worked in tandem with their skill set to communicate their characters' different personalities.
You look terrible.
So that's what I mean when I said actors aren't encouraged to be ugly anymore. However, back in the day, even when actors played attractive characters, because most movie stars were conventionally stunning for their time, they still had recognizable human faces and bodies. Bodies and faces without filler, without a 24/7 personal trainer, without steroids. For example, R.S. Benedict writes that while Kurt Russell is presented as a hunk in the 1981 film Escape from New York, his abs had no definition. Nowadays, these Marvel action heroes post, in Benedict's words, ultra-swole selfies on Instagram, suggesting physiques crafted with chemical assistance. So then the second side of it is that actors aren't encouraged to perform ugliness anymore either, such as like contorting their faces in crazy ways. Marlon Brando was not an ugly actor by any means, but he did perform ugliness all the time, and it was compelling to watch. Most of this lack of expressiveness comes from Botox.
I am very, 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 very upset about this.
You don't look upset.
It's the Botox.
Botox is typically injected in the forehead, the frown lines, crow's feet, freezing the parts of the face that are key for visibly expressing emotion on screen. In a video essay, Marina McBain notes the importance of micro-expressions, which are slight facial cues that our brains are wired to read, such as eyebrow twitches, skin bunching around the eyes during an authentic smile, or forehead wrinkles that emerge before someone cries. McBain argues that these are often lost when faces are frozen from Botox, suggesting that watching a film feels more like watching waxworks come to life. McBain also highlights how filming techniques have responded to the influx of frozen faces, often relying on sad music, cutaway shots, or hyper-transparent dialogue to communicate emotion. In other words, there's way more telling instead of showing on screen now, which also just feels in line with how television is made to be more second screen friendly.
Walk me through everything again. From the beginning. I've told you already. Tell me again.
AKA entertainment that you can pay attention to while half your attention is fixated on your phone. So why is all this happening, right? The Godfather was a massive box office success and lives on as one of the most spectacular movies in cinematic history. It was even referenced in Zootopia. That's how you know it's good. And I could say that exact same phrase, that it was a spectacular movie about many movies of the 20th century that featured varied looking actors and emotional expressiveness. So why have we messed with success? Like, why have we rewritten the formula? The obvious answer is that cosmetic enhancements are responses to contemporary beauty trends. So while white teeth, flawless skin, sleek hair, and gym-toned physiques in a film set in a late 18th century Yorkshire moor may sometimes take viewers out of the time period, having beautiful, gorgeous, perfect actors at the forefront of your film can draw in a bigger audience and therefore bring in more money in a precarious time for the film industry. My hypothesis is that the number of Jacob Elordi fan cam edits carried Saltburn on their perfectly sculpted backs. And so as our society becomes increasingly image conscious, it makes sense that films would reflect that vanity. Also, part of the Hollywood financial scarcity mindset is the casting of the same 10 actors in every project. Actors who are booked and busy, like Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi, thus become deemed as movie stars due to them being attractive by 21st century standards, being highly visible, cast and everything, and also because they're often playing IP icons like Barbie and Elvis. So it's like doubling the recognizability. It's a hat on a hat. Therefore, no matter how transformative the costume may be, it is just sometimes hard not to see the star underneath the character. We're just very aware of who they are. We're very aware of who sold this ticket to us. This was especially the case for me with Jacob Elordi when he played the creature in Frankenstein. Dare I say, he could have looked uglier. Or, just less recognizable. I think of Bill Skarsgård in Nosferatu, in which he wasn't terrifically ugly, but he didn't look like Bill. But I think for Elordi, someone at the top knew that he's a movie star and wanted to preserve his recognizability for promotional purposes so that fans could create their fan cams and post aesthetic stills. That's my conspiracy theory, at least. I'm an actress and I'm in this industry and I have a lot of friends in this industry and we're all struggling to get cast, right? And because we're not in a period of abundance, so to speak, and because acting is such a visual medium, it is normal for an actor to obsess about how they look. I mean, most women are socialized to fixate on their looks in general, so the tendency already feels natural, especially in the age of social media. In the wise words of Gia Tolentino, social media has supercharged the propensity to regard one's personal identity as a potential source of profit, and, especially for young women, to regard one's body this way too. For those born with assets, natural assets, capital assets, or both, it can seem sensible, even automatic, to think of your body the way that a McKinsey consultant would think about a corporation. Identify underperforming sectors and remake them. Discard whatever doesn't increase profits and reorient the business toward whatever does. And the thing is, remaking your underperforming sectors is not without success. It reminds me of what comedian Holmes said on Caleb Heron's podcast a month ago I listened to. And she was talking about how a lot of women she knows are getting really skinny. But those women are receiving benefits from getting skinnier. So why wouldn't they keep doing it if it's tangibly improving their lives? Hollywood does reward its actors for their appearances, even if the rest of us are like, whoa there, what is happening? Squarespace is a fantastic platform to help you build the website of your dreams for both desktop and mobile optimization. They have tons of pre-made templates and extra customization options to make your website uniquely you. Of course, design is only one part of having a website, especially if you're someone who owns their business and needs a storefront. Squarespace makes it super easy with their tools that allow you to set up whatever kind of product listings you want, be they physical items, digital downloads, or memberships. Or if you're using your website like a portfolio, Squarespace has really great professional portfolio designs. You can display projects and customizable galleries and add password-protected pages to share private work with any prospective clients. Check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Minalay to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. this year, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences introduced the Academy Award for Achievement in Casting to recognize the invaluability of casting directors in cinema. As Esther Zuckerman covered it for the New York Times, casting directors are responsible for the entire landscape of faces we see on screen. She writes, in that way, perhaps the casting award is most akin to the one honoring production design. Just as the sets have to feel real, so do the people in them. Look, none of us were born yesterday, unless you were. Happy belated birthday. We don't cast actors solely on their acting ability. We never really have. So how do casting directors cast? Well, every director has their different approaches, but that can also heavily depend on which directors and producers that they work with. For example, the inaugural winner of said casting award this year was Cassandra Koulakundis for her work on Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another. Koulakundis has worked with PTA for nearly 3 decades and has thus developed a kind of casting shorthand with him. She shares that he can now send a photo of a random person who resembles the character he imagines, and she can respond with names of potential actors.
Still got it, man.
Thanks.
Really terrific.
This approach clearly places greater weight on appearance in casting, which makes sense if the character's physical form is integral to their on-screen characterization. However, I could also see fixating on appearance as limiting in some contexts, inhibiting directors from considering actors who could bring something fresh to the role. I don't blame directors for being headstrong about their ideas because I'm working on a screenplay right now with my friend, and for some of these central characters, we've already discussed potential actors who could play them in the writing process. Again, it's a visual medium, and I'm sure that many directors and writers, like myself, envision a scene playing out in their heads when they're working on a script. This is, however, why diversity in arts and entertainment is still really important, especially on the storytelling side. Because most of the time, a white director is going to imagine their characters as being white, because that's what they know. The trickle-down effect of less representation in the writer's room is less representation on screens. Other casting directors have noted taking a vibes-based approach. There's actually this one video of Robert De Niro's audition for the Sonny character in The Godfather, which he didn't end up getting, and one of my older acting teachers always loves to bring up this example as a way to comfort students about not getting jobs, because he's like, it's not always about your acting ability. No one would say that Mr. De Niro is not a top actor, but the role just required a certain vibe that James Caan had.
I want somebody good, and I mean very good, to plant that gun.
Casting director Gabriel Dominguez, who worked on The Secret Agent, has said that he finds expressive faces key to his job. Apart from Wagner Moura, who was hired as the film's lead actor, Dominguez held an open call for actors specifically from the northeast region of Brazil, where the film takes place. From there, Dominguez then looked for actors who had a unique kind of expressiveness. He tells the New York Times that if you keep your eyes open to the variety of human shapes, you succeed in casting because people are so interesting. Nina Gold, casting director for Hamnet, tells the Times that she had similar flexible criteria for casting, prioritizing an actor's essence as it relates to the script. She said, it's about how the actor's essence intersects with the character on the page. Having this more open, vibes-based perspective on casting can allow more actors to be considered for a role, enabling performers to bring something fresh to a character that a writer or director may not have considered. But appearances are still definitely a part of what gives someone a vibe. And regardless of the casting approach, there is a clear incentive for casting recognizable and beloved faces in lead roles. While there are exceptions here and there, films with movie star leads have a much higher chance of getting a theatrical release. So, as you might expect, studio films, or those produced by Walt Disney, Sony, Universal, Paramount, and Warner Brothers, more often feature movie stars in their casts. In 2017, American Film Market found that out of 123 studio films, 103 films had stars in the cast. They do this because consumers respond positively to familiar branding. People feel safest trying out new things when they come under the banner of an already trusted brand. Coca-Cola rolling out a new variety of Coke, or McDonald's introducing a new menu item. I think this is especially true at a time when more people are preferring the convenience of watching movies at home on a streaming service rather than venturing out to the theater. And therefore, studios have to pull out more stops to get people into the movie theaters, and casting tried and true stars is a reliable way to do that. I mean, my mom, for instance, will sometimes refer to a new movie release as that one with Matt Damon. The movie title did not sink in because it was unfamiliar, but good old Matt Damon, now that's a memorable face. That's a brand. In saying this, independent films also have a much greater chance of financially succeeding if they have a movie star in their cast. Indie filmmakers typically lack a company brand, an established audience, and they don't usually have distribution channels locked before the film's debut. Movie stars thus tend to verify to us audiences that this indie movie is worth seeing. Roshan Sethi, director of 2024 indie rom-com A Nice Indian Boy, talked about the typical fundraising model for independent films on the Pop Shift podcast Scatterbrain. So after a script is written and initial funding is secured, indie filmmakers will often try to attach a lauded actor to a film, which can allow them to raise additional money. After the film is made and premieres at a festival, it's sold to a distributor, ideally for as much, if not more, than it was made for. Having a well-known name in the cast can ideally lead to more money raised for production at the outset and a higher payout from the distributor. While this model of fundraising is precarious to begin with, it's becoming increasingly insecure as indie directors are struggling to raise as much money to offer to famous actors as they used to. As a result, Sethi shares that indies aren't sold for as much as they used to be either. And even when they are, they're not making as much in theaters. Clearly, recognizable actors with devoted fan bases draw more viewers, meaning more money for movie investor. I mean, just take a look at the White Boy of the Month phenomenon, in which the buzzy white male actor the internet is obsessed with in a particular moment is seemingly cast in every new project for months on end. Timothée Chalamet was arguably the first of his generation with his breakout performance in Call Me By Your Name in 2017, which kicked off a streak of him being in what felt like every new release, a streak that's endured to this day. Since then, Jacob Elordi, Paul Mescal, Josh O'Connor, Harris Dickinson, and others have taken their turn in the spotlight, with all of them holding a kind of like monopoly over leading male roles. Most recently, for instance, the upcoming Beatles biopics by Sam Mendes will star Mescal and Dickinson, as well as Barry Keoghan and Joseph Quinn, who have each taken a turn being the hot new thing for several months at a time. On the Beatles casting, critic Tim Roby writes, "The pool from which these names were taken in the first place was one of Hollywood's own devising. More fool anyone who thought such fan worship wasn't a factory-farmed element of the PR game, designed to push a few increasingly familiar faces into our Instagram feeds and make them hot properties. The upshot of this is that the same cluster of it-boy actors have an oligopoly, not only on playing the Fab Four, but on every male lead going. They are, and increasingly seems, cast in absolutely every film currently in production." Yeah, and I mean, what's more to be said other than these roles, this like idea of a white boy of the month is always for a white boy who also tends to be like the most overrepresented demographic in Hollywood and one who never struggles to get work, essentially. Even Sethi said that like the funding of A Nice Indian Boy came off the back of like Jonathan Groff, which is so ironic. Apart from casting widely known and admired faces, more conventionally attractive actors are often prioritized. But casting director Shakira Dowling tells Day's Beauty that this isn't necessarily coming from the biases of casting directors specifically, but from an image-driven culture. She shares that young actors often enter the film industry having already altered themselves to fit a perceived standard of Instagrammable beauty before they've even developed as performers, driven by societal pressures at large. Casting director David Rubin also points out that filmmakers often conceive leading roles as physically idealized, leaving little room for inventive ways of portraying them. Many protagonists in popular media are already written as attractive or desirable, whether it's a ripped Marvel hero or like a bumbling young woman coming of age. There's actually a good number of roles that I've auditioned for where the character breakdown is literally like, Stacy is beautiful. She's the most popular girl in town. And I can imagine that for like some struggling actors out there, they'll perceive beautiful in their subjective social media kind of way and end up altering their appearance if they're not booking. And then they keep getting these characters with these sort of like nebulously attractive descriptions. So it's just like a cycle that keeps going. The other thing is you don't usually get feedback unless you book a part. So it's really easy to get in your head about what the reasons were for why you didn't. It really could be your looks. You have no idea. However, Rubin shares that his ultimate goal is to cast actors in roles where their unconventional appearance has no bearing on the character or storyline, opening up possibilities for actors who don't adhere to conventional beauty standards. Still, the standards for women actors in particular are unrealistically high. Allison Jones, a casting director who worked on Barbie, tells NPR that in the 80s, she cast many comedies that starred an average-looking, funny guy with an astonishingly gorgeous girlfriend, which sounds like almost every Adam Sandler movie. Often, the actresses she would bring in for auditions were judged harshly for not being beautiful enough, despite them being infinitely more attractive than their male counterparts, even in the context of a satirical comedy. Many women casting directors corroborate her story, with Amanda Hess sharing that she's never heard a female producer comment on an actress's age or weight as male ones do. Even though actresses are expected to be disproportionately more attractive than men on screen, many filmmakers like Baz Luhrmann and Martin Scorsese have aversions to cosmetic procedures like Botox, as do casting directors. Interestingly, Nina Gold points out that Botox is especially prevalent among American actors, noting that it's often easier to cast British actors for American parts because they look a bit more realistic, and because for some reason every British actor can nail an American accent. American women may face especially high pressure to alter themselves, though, due to the high number of influencers and reality TV stars living in Los Angeles, as well as Hollywood being the epicenter of entertainment. While casting directors often suggest that a natural look is best, actresses, like all women, they're just like us, experience a double bind when it comes to beauty, as they're expected to adhere to a practical beauty standards, but not appear as though they've done too much to themselves. There's also the fact that actresses are usually scrutinized for their appearances on their press tours, where DSLRs are constantly snapping shots of them in HD. So while the acting part of being an actor may require less cosmetic enhancement, the marketing part of being an actor may actually propel someone to go for it anyway. There are also some procedures that are starting to feel non-negotiable. Given how few leading roles there still are for women who look middle-aged, actresses are almost expected to get Botox as they age to stay competitive. Casting director Kenneth Earl already said in 2003 that Botox has become an extension of the makeup that actors and actresses wear for the camera. Now it feels like the endoscopic facelifts might be the new makeup. Of course, the practice of movie stars physically altering themselves isn't new, but rather part of an existing tradition of stars being engineered for the silver screen. You know we love to talk about history on this channel, so let's take a little historical interlude. In the first half of the 20th century, Hollywood was dominated by only a handful of studios, including MGM, Warner Brothers, Paramount, 20th Century Fox, and RKO. These studios signed actors, technicians, and directors to projects, ceding the majority power to studio executives and producers. Jacqueline Stewart, host of the Academy Museum podcast, likens the classic Hollywood studio system to a factory operation. So, with practicality and efficiency top of mind, actors were usually cast in the same kinds of roles, influenced by age, gender, appearance, and technical abilities. The system was rigid, almost assembly line-like in style, in which actors were reprimanded for refusing or resisting their assigned parts. Studios also often created stars from scratch. It was totally like an industry plant type of model. Movie studios were known to scour the country looking for men and women with kernels of talent, whether it be acting, singing, dancing, or simply being physically attractive. After securing a person with star potential, studios completely made them over, administering acting lessons and overhaul makeovers to engineer the perfect movie star. During this star search, executives were even more scrutinizing about women than they are today. Actresses like Alicia Rutt and Betty Campbell were criticized for appearing too old, homely, and even plain ordinary. For instance, Eleanor Powell was a dancer on Broadway and film who was scouted by MGM. And while she was a talented dancer, Jeanine Basinger writes that Powell was quite tall by old Hollywood standards, describing her as a bit gawky with no inherent glamour or acting ability. But her dancing skills made her a good candidate for the movie star treatment, motivating the studio to take a chance on her. MGM prescribed her hair growth products, gave her violet ray treatments that peeled her skin and made her freckles disappear, whitened and capped her teeth, gave her posture lessons, and put her on a diet and exercise routine to make her palatable for the screen.
We can celebrate it together if you really care to meet me.
Many studios were somewhat transparent with media outlets about their process of making over stars. For instance, a magazine article published details about Powell's transformation, crediting the actress herself for rethinking her hair, makeup, and nails, and the studio for her health regimen and overall presentation in the first movie. The magazine even features a quote from Powell on her preparation for stardom, reading, "I haven't any idea how many people actually had a part in changing me for the screen. There seemed to be everybody from Mr. Mayor on down to my maid making suggestions, trying different things. Now it takes me 2 hours just to get ready for bed at night, but it's worth it." Studios were keen to show the public how movie stars were made to keep the dream of stardom alive. Media always explained that stars possess some kind of intelligence, vitality, and poise, but also an unknown key ingredient, an X factor of sorts. leading readers to wonder if they too might have it. The thought was that like if readers saw how ordinary people like them could be picked up and made into movie stars, the movie star as an idea would remain aspirational, but not so out of reach that it felt impossible to achieve. The star makeover was really just a heightened version of the beauty routines women put themselves through every day, rendering the star identity not so distant. You know, you could be parasocial in that way if you feel like, oh, maybe one day I can be a star. I remember when I was growing up in the 2000s, there was still this dream that people could be plucked off the streets of LA and shoved into a movie. But during this early era in Hollywood, viewers perceived people on film to be an amalgamation of their real life selves and the characters they played on screen. Studios conceived actors within archetypes, rarely casting them outside of their typical roles, as I said. The public became conditioned to expect certain actors playing certain characters, and then often became upset when their expectations were violated. This typecasting method served to limit the artistic growth of many actors. And this is something that I think still exists for actors in the way that Disney Channel stars have a difficult time transitioning into serious actors. I mean, they do have to go back to the books because Disney acting is its own thing. To put it nicely,
if you're going to deface someone's locker, at least make it original.
But even when they do put in the work, audiences are resistant to accept it initially. And even for my own career, I feel like it's difficult for people to see me as a storyteller because so much of my published work is nonfiction. And even as I say that, it took years for people to even recognize that I had a social media platform. Like, I remember like my first fashion week, like no one really wanted to talk to me. Like they all kind of upturned their nose at people who were making fashion content on social media. And now it's like the fashion industry. I mean, the Met Gala, they're still resistant about, but like in general, they're kind of like, come here, like come make content, please. It's interesting how perceptions can change or not. Humans like easy categories, and industries tend to exploit that at the demise of the artists that make up those industries. According to Basinger, some claim that studios would read fan mail, interview fan clubs, and disseminate questionnaires through magazines to brand stars in response to fans' desires and perceptions of them. Basinger explains that answers from fans almost always boil down to one common denominator. Popular movie stars were perceived to have a tangible physical presence, seeming as though they're in the room with you when they're on the screen. For instance, on movie star Clark Gable, one fan said, "He's so real, I almost feel I can reach out and touch him." Basinger writes that great movie stars were alive inside a frame. This sense of aliveness may be part of why fans respond poorly to actors with visible plastic surgery on screen nowadays. When actors with high amounts of filler and Botox struggle to emulate full human facial expressions, it creates this sort of mass-produced uncanny valley effect, making viewers feel as though they're looking at robots. I bring up this history stuff not only because I find it also interesting, but because I'm noticing a situation of history repeating itself. Of course, plastic surgery wasn't as prevalent in old Hollywood, which is why Mr. Gable felt alive for many viewers, but the idea of manufacturing stars in an assembly-like fashion came from a place of conservative filmmaking, a place of scarcity and distrust that audiences would still support something if it wasn't what they were familiar with. And similarly, I find that nowadays, a lot of what we're seeing is risk-averse behavior. Cosmetic surgery is definitely tied to this. Looking the same kind of beautiful is conservative. It's a distrust that our individual differences are interesting and unique and worth watching and worth empathizing with. Because that's what engaging with the film means. It's empathizing with the characters we see on screen. And what does that mean if the only faces we're told to empathize with are the ones that have been cosmetically enhanced to fit the highest form of conventional beauty? You know, this also makes me think of Merle Oberon, who was a famous actress in the 1930s. She was half Sri Lankan, but passed as fully white to immigrate to America and navigate Hollywood's Hays Code, which restricted interracial romance on screen. She underwent skin bleaching to enhance her appearance as white, using bleach creams loaded with ammoniated mercury, a poisonous substance. I guess it paid off because in 1935, she was nominated for an Oscar for her role in The Dark Angel, becoming the first Asian actress to be nominated for an Academy Award, a fact that the public wouldn't find out until much later. But then her career later declined because of how her skin appeared in Technicolor color tests. And I'm saying all this because it was never about beauty. She was beautiful, and even beautiful by Hollywood standards to be booking lead parts, but That was because they were in black and white. There's always a message underneath what we're trying to say is the beauty standard. And it's not just the casting that's conservative either. Modern film plots have also become more predictable, relying on predictive analysis and market research, as is done in other business-oriented sectors. According to cinematographer Jake Uriz, a risk-averse approach to filmmaking is flattening the contours of acceptable subject matter and production style. Having a unique storyline and perspective has become less important than appealing to as wide a group as possible. This predictability contributes to a culture of homogeneity in which our stories, physical spaces, and faces all look too similar. For N+1 magazine, Will Tavlin wrote about Netflix's casual viewing programming, which is produced with the idea that viewers tend to play Netflix in the background of their day, while cooking, doing laundry, or simply scrolling on their phones. Second screen, like I said. As such, in a typical Netflix film, the dialogue is often stilted and over-explained to keep distracted viewers in the loop. The titles and film covers announce exactly what the film will contain, so there are no surprises, like a perfect pairing for a rom-com, or murder mystery for a murder mystery. The visuals are often oversaturated and flat, instead of mise-en-scène. Recognizable songs are piped in to set an emotional tone. Tavlin writes that Netflix operates with the assumption that you don't need a hit to succeed. You just need to make enough of every genre to satisfy everyone. As such, Netflix films are churned out to cater to over 2,000 taste clusters, which are genre-like groupings the company uses to segment its audience, greenlight programs, and recommend films and shows to subscribers. Similar to old Hollywood studios tracking audiences' reactions to actors, Netflix tracks audience data to provide viewers with more of what they want. This leads to an onslaught of widely appealing nonfiction programs, true crime, and dating reality TV shows, inciting a loop of making the same thing over and over. It's not just film plots that have become more sanitized, though. Movie sets have too. For instance, R.S. Benedict writes about the cramped, lived-in setting of 80s movies like The Poltergeist, in which the family home is scattered with toys and magazines, cardboard boxes waiting to be unpacked, and framed pictures leaning on the wall. Compare this to homes and films now. Massive, sterile, cavernous spaces with minimalist furniture. Kitchens are industrial size and spotless, and they contain no food. There's no excess. There's no mess. Sidebar, 90s and early 2000s set design actually went off. Nancy Meyers films in particular, I'm thinking of Carrie Bradshaw's apartment in Sex and the City, obviously, The House in the Family Stone, Meryl Streep's apartment in The Hours. Like, when can we get these messy lived-in homes again? I don't want any more of those modern Kim Kardashian-esque houses and movies anymore. Like, enough is enough. I want to be able to know a character based on the posters she has in her bedroom. But I think this total flattening of everything from the way movies look to the lack of detail in sets to the unrealistic surgically enhanced faces and bodies leads to a sense that what we're watching is not really human and not really consistent with the messiness of living. And this can be psychological as well. Seeing realistic human emotion enables empathy in storytelling due to the effects of mimicry. Mirror neurons are specialized brain cells that fire when an individual performs a task and when they watch the task being performed by another, acting as a mirror of the observed behavior. While theories on the effects of mirror neurons remain controversial, hypotheses suggest that mimicry can lead to emotional contagion and even empathy. Some scientists have also found that when people unconsciously mimic their partner's expressions of emotion, they feel parts of that emotion as well. And also, kinesthetic and phonetic empathy are rooted in an observer feeling what a dancer or musician feels. Also to say, humans elicit potent responses and feelings when exposed to human emotion and behavior. And beyond being conditioned to favor perfection, people are clearly charmed by unexpected faces. For instance, Amy Lou Wood, star of the most recent season of The White Lotus, experienced a warm public reception because of her smile, which differed from the heavily veneered Hollywood look. Her teeth were even described as inspiring, a revelation, radical, and the real star of the show by various outlets, suggesting the public's appetite for unique features. Marty Supreme had a varied landscape of faces on screen, featuring 140 non-actors. While I do have some reservations about casting non-actors when so many actors are looking for work, the positive side of straight casting is that these are probably people not so concerned with shopping up their looks, and for a period film, that's probably a good thing. Timothée Chalamet also donned fake acne scars as Marty Mauser to accentuate his character's scrappiness, which reminded me of Lady Bird because Saoirse Ronan similarly left her acne uncovered to convey a sense of teenage realism. The Holdovers is another recent film praised for its realism, with one of its top Letterboxd reviews reading, "Perfect casting, no remnants of Instagram face." Lead actor and Golden Globe winner Paul Giamatti wore a lens in the film to give the appearance of a lazy eye, helping mark his character, Paul Hunnam, as an outsider. Giamatti told Vanity Fair that he found the process of physically transforming for the role to be fascinating, sharing that he takes pleasure in changing his appearance for a part. It's these physical idiosyncrasies that help us identify characters as whole humans, allowing us to feel compassion that's similar to what we feel for real people and allowing us to fully believe a story. On the other hand, seeing exaggerated, unnatural faces and bodies will only continue to distort our relationship to beauty and realism. Andrew T. Badgley notes that male jewel beetles are hardwired to seek large, shiny, dimpled females as mates, as those traits signal fertility. However, when discarded brown beer bottles appeared near the beetles' habitat in Australia, the males tried to mate with the bottles instead of the females as they were larger and shinier. Badgley shares that the same principle applies to humans. For instance, modern pornography, particularly when it's AI, often shows stylized and hyperbolic bodies and sexual behaviors that may not be found in nature, which boosts dopamine due to the novelty and exaggerated sexual cues, especially among adolescents with developing reward systems. This is similarly happening to an extent with our perception of beauty and plastic surgery. Perception drift refers to the sensation of our brains forgetting a previous appearance and our judgment shifting significantly in how we define attractiveness as a result. Likewise, filler blindness describes people becoming unaware of how filled their face has become, developing a distorted view of their looks. As plastic surgery becomes both more extreme and widespread, my fear is that we'll become somewhat desensitized to it and out of touch with what's real. As film critic Manohla Dargis writes, acting always involves an element of plasticity, in which actors transform into other people and beings before our very eyes. Dargis goes on to say, while we admire actors who build hard muscle, pack on the pounds, and downsize to skin and bone, no such glory awaits those who publicly admit to plastic surgery. Beauty in Hollywood is rarely natural, but it is highly prized, fetishized. I understand why whenever a celebrity looks strange, people feel a visceral reaction to it, especially when there's multiple celebrities and then it feels like it's like a movement. I'm obviously aware of how people are getting skinnier and skinnier. And yes, it does distress me. It does, because whatever beauty trends celebrities partake in, they naturally trickle down to the general public. In 2024, a cosmetic doctor told Sky News that requests for filler went up 12-fold after the latest season of Love Island aired. And when Kylie Jenner first admitted to getting lip filler in 2015, there was a 70% rise in inquiries for the procedure within 24 hours. Humans are easily influenced. Studies show that our perception of desirable body weight or muscularity level can dial up or down by showing us images that aren't necessarily appealing, but extreme in some way. When it comes to critiquing beauty culture, we often find ourselves fucked then. Like when we talk about how people look, we are in some ways maintaining that physical appearance is important. But if we don't stop talking about how uncanny everyone's looking, our cultural beauty standards will continue to shift towards the more unnatural and will grow unfamiliar with how people actually look. It's made me kind of personally uncomfortable with how to go about having these conversations because there's just like so much anger and desire for misunderstanding either way. Like I wanted to talk about the casting process at the beginning of this video because I think it's important to understand why people are doing what they're doing. And it's not out of this like sadistic pleasure to one up their fellow human for the most part. It's a form of body dysmorphia that is encouraged by the entertainment industry and by society at large. Actors, especially actresses, are victims of a perverse value system. But the every person has the capability of upholding this value system. Like every time we compliment someone for getting work done or by losing weight, or anytime we give someone a job because they look younger, it confirms that these appearance adjustments are reaping rewards. And then why would anyone not do it? And then it becomes this like class divide of people who are able to afford lots of plastic surgery, and then the people who can't. And then it also leads to worse art because we're all looking like the same little robots and production sets are bad. And I just want a Nancy Meyers house again. At the same time, I think this overcorrection to be like, this person is beautiful because they don't have plastic surgery is still trying to set a standard of beauty. In a utopic world, we'd be dismantling beauty as a status marker altogether. And that means not complimenting people for gaining or losing weight. Related but unrelated. But also please support indie cinema, guys, always, especially if you don't recognize anyone in the cast. Sometimes you think about how we all like to complain about how it's like boring to see the same actors and everything. But there's actually so many movies getting made all the time that are not having to dance around the studio's rules and storytelling formulas. They're just not making money because not many people search for or support these movies, or, you know, like people don't know about them. And they're not getting promoted, but they exist. And it's hard to come by them if you don't live in a city for sure, but a lot of them do get picked up by streamers like Tubi and Ovid. I've just been in the mindset where I only want to support and even be aware of things that interest me and that feed me artistically. It's hard because I do a lot of cultural criticism, and so I kind of have to see things I don't want to see. But I try to put up as many boundaries as I realistically can these days, because take a famous celebrity who's losing a lot of weight drastically. Like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to see people talking about it. I feel like the best thing for that person is to get help. But I also don't think they'll get help because masses of strangers on the internet are telling them to. And then because we're all like talking about it, it's just like making me think about my own self more and my own body more, which is not helpful either. I don't know. It's like we can talk about what's happening as a phenomenon for sure, but I think giving attention to like individual people who are participating in these trends is just unhelpful for everyone, as I said, like including us regular people, because the visibility is damaging and lets us know subconsciously that getting skinny is what brings attention. So I'd rather not give those people my attention. And at this point, I have like taken up like banning certain words from coming up in my Explore page so that I don't have to see them. Anyways, I hope you're all kind to yourself. Let me know what ways you're taking care of yourself and your artistic practice and humanity in general in this like commercialized, industrialized time. Let me know your thoughts about the state of film and acting. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. I hope you're able to find some joy within these kind of like lack of joyous things that we're talking about and make an indie film. Okay. My name is Mina. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.